I'll tell you how to determine the range of any electric vehicle, whether it's a hub motor or an electric car. And simple physics will help us with that. Behind me, you can see two intimidating formulas, but don't rush to grab your textbooks just yet. I'll explain everything to you in a simple and accessible way. Let's start with the fact that electric motors have both nominal and peak power ratings. Nominal power is the level at which the motor operates most comfortably, without any strain at all. And peak power is the maximum possible output that the electric motor is capable of delivering. But even then, it can only sustain that power for a very short period of time, like a power lifter who lifts their maximum weight once and then doesn't approach the barbell again for several minutes. For example, an electric motorcycle with a motor rated at 3 kilowatts can, during a brief peak, deliver as much as 10 kilowatts. But the power consumed depends not only on the RPM, but also on the load on the motor. And this is very important for calculations. The current consumption graph of electric transport while in motion looks roughly like this. The vertical axis represents current consumption, where the motor's nominal and peak power are indicated. The horizontal axis represents speed and load. It marks acceleration from 0 to maximum speed, then maintaining maximum speed and climbing a hill. So the maximum current consumption occurs during acceleration. Moreover, rapid acceleration and smooth acceleration, which is shown here with a dashed line, will differ in current consumption due to the different loads. Maintaining cruising speed, regardless of whether it is the maximum or not, will require much less energy. Riding uphill, by the way, just like accelerating, increases current consumption, as can be seen on the graph. In order to overcome an incline, current consumption increases and then levels off onto a plateau. The plateau at which the current consumption stabilizes while riding uphill depends on the slope angle and the power of the motor, essentially how difficult the climb is for it. It is precisely because of the difference in current consumption under various circumstances that there are two formulas for calculating range. One for calculating the minimum range for people who can't ride without keeping the throttle fully open, and one for the maximum range for those who prefer a leisurely ride. By the way, the formula for calculating range is only accurate for electric vehicles that have good traction with the road, because if you're churning up mud, for example, on an electric ATV, you'll still drain the battery even if you're barely moving. Let's move on to the formula. The range is equal to the battery capacity in watt-hours divided by the motor power, and the resulting number is multiplied by the vehicle's speed. The minimum and maximum range differ only in that for the first formula we use the peak motor power, and for the second, the nominal power. Seems simple enough, but where do you get these numbers? Let's start with the battery capacity in watt-hours. To do this, we simply multiply its voltage by its capacity in ampere-hours. For example, this battery is 72 volts and 80 ampere-hours, which, when multiplied, gives 5,760 watt-hours. Next is the motor power. The nominal power is usually indicated right on the motor itself, and it's very easy to check. The peak power, however, is not. Of course, you can measure it using an app connected to the BMS and see the peak current output, but there are simpler options. They may have some margin of error, of course, but they'll save you a lot of time. I'm talking about the controller. Every controller has the maximum current it can handle indicated on it. For example, the controller I have here is 72 volts, 150 amps. Multiply those numbers and you get 10,800 watts. Of course, you could also ask the seller about the vehicle's peak power, but they might exaggerate. The same goes for the next parameter, the maximum speed, which should only be measured using GPS. Let's break it down with an example. An electric motorcycle with a 5 kilowatt hub motor, a 72 volt, 250 amp controller, and a 72 volt, 90 amp hour battery. The speed of such a motorcycle, according to GPS, is 120 kilometers per hour, although some sales gurus claim it's as much as 150. As they say, trust but verify. Now let's calculate all the necessary values for our formula. We already know the nominal value. To find the peak, we multiply 72 by 250 and get 18,000 watts. Next, to find out the actual battery capacity in watt-hours, we multiply 72 by 90 and get approximately 6,500 watt-hours. Yes, I know that the discharge rate of some cells might not be enough to reach peak power, but I won't include that here because we've already overloaded the video with calculations and formulas. So let's calculate the minimum range. What we have here is 6,500 watt-hours, and that is exactly 6,500 in total. First, we take that value and divide it by the peak motor power, which is currently rated at 18 kilowatts. Then we proceed to multiply that result by the current GPS speed, which is exactly 120 kilometers per hour. Consequently, we arrive at a total of approximately 43 kilometers. Keep in mind that the minimum range is much less realistic than the maximum, because to achieve that number, you would have to be fully loaded, going uphill at full throttle all the time. So you should take this number as, in the worst case scenario, I'll definitely go farther than this. Now let's calculate the maximum range. Here, everything is the same, except instead of the engine's peak power, we use the nominal value. So, to find the answer, we take 6,500. Then, we divide that by 5,000. And finally, we multiply the result by 120. After performing those steps, the final calculation comes out to be approximately 156 kilometers in total distance. You can already factor in a margin of error for your weight, your riding style, or the terrain, which I previously showed on the current consumption graph, into this number. But based on actual real-world riding experience, such a motorcycle is realistically expected to cover a total distance of somewhere in the range of 100 and 130 kilometers. Now, armed with this knowledge, whenever someone promises you an unrealistically high range on the most budget battery, you can confidently say,